We're here today to interview Miss Lila Zuck. She is the president and founder of the Collier County Historical Research Center, Incorporated in Collier County, as well as our local historian extraordinaire. We have with us her book, the biggest book. She's done 9 books, but this one was the one that I fell in love with when I went down to tour the cottages for the first time, and it's called The History of Naples, Florida, A Second Paradise. Naples, A Second Paradise. So with the subtitle, The History of Naples, Florida. So we thought it would be very interesting to speak with her and get a little more of the history. If you don't want to read the whole book, but I highly recommend it, but it is at the libraries.
Yes.
Is correct? And so when we talk to Ms. Zuck, we will get some more information on what prompted her to write this book. So good morning.
Good morning to you. Good morning.
Thank you for coming and talking to us.
You're most welcome.
As I told you, I'm trying to get some videos of the history. We had a great time at the Centennial, so thank you for coming there. But using your information, it was so helpful when we were doing the 100 years of the clerk's office, and you helped us with all of the research and trying to find names and information. So I was so appreciative of that I really wanted you to come and just talk to us a little more about everything. So from the beginning, a native Floridian.
Well, I like to say I'm both. I came as a winter visitor, and I became a native Floridian. My mother was pregnant, and she delivered in Miami. She came despite the fact that she was about ready to deliver, and I was born in Miami. My children were also born, so they're second-generation native Floridian. And my granddaughter, Emma, is third-generation native Floridian. She was born here as well.
Was she born in Naples or Miami?
She was born in Naples. Yes.
So you've always had an interest in writing, and what started you in the path to the historian?
Well, I've always been interested in writing, and writing was a big part of my primary and secondary education growing up. And so I wrote a lot. I always wrote a lot: poetry, articles, stories, short stories, and books. And then as I grew older, I became interested in biological research, medical research. And so that sort of set me on a path to research. And when I came to Naples, I became interested in the history of Naples, and having had that scientific background, it enabled me to research scientifically, which is chronologically. And I like to do my work chronologically so that one can understand how a theme of a book developed, how the county developed, how the city of Naples developed, and the other topics that I write about.
Well, I found it very interesting, and I've read not only that, but I was just perusing these again today, the Hotel Naples on the Gulf, and this is a Summerland in wintertime, 1888.
That was the first structure built in Naples. It's the structural matriarch of Naples.
Yes, so I found that interesting, and it has some great pictures in it, and things that I think people would be very interested in taking a look at. So what is it about that Naples and Collier County, though, that brought your interest to history here?
Well, I'm glad you
first moved here.
I'm glad you asked me that question, because my first neighbor and friend was Vi Stewart. Vi Stewart was an old-timer. She was because she passed away in the mid-90s. Vi Stewart was the daughter-in-law of Captain Charles Stewart, who came to Naples in 1900 and became postmaster in 1908. Vi introduced me to her circle of friends, and they were just wonderful women, and they welcomed me into their group and started talking to me about what Naples was like when they first came here. And that prompted me to become interested in Naples. And I went to the library to look for a book on Naples, and I didn't find one. And I thought, well, that's not possible, and I couldn't find one. So I decided to start taking notes and to write one. So I began talking to all these old-timers and making notes. And then one day I realized I need more than just talking to old-timers. I need facts. And there's only one place to get facts, and that's from research.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because I became more and more interested in Naples history when I moved here. Originally, I worked at the sheriff's office, and we gathered a little bit of history about the first motorcycle deputy, things like that. But in general history, I love going to Everglades City. I enjoy seeing the old culture from Naples. And so I could really understand you becoming entrenched in it and just want to write more and find out
Yes.
more. So what was the most interesting thing? We're going to digress just a little bit. When you were meeting with these ladies and everything, do you have a little tidbit story? What was either the funniest or something that you
Well,
thought
Elizabeth Parker told me how they used to, at low tide, they used to walk across Naples Bay to East Naples to get ice cream. There was someone there that made ice cream, and they used to walk across Naples Bay. I mean, imagine walking across Naples Bay. The water was crystal clear. It was clean. It wasn't very deep. And that's what they did. That was the funniest story. The quaintest story.
Yeah, that's a fun one, though. Okay, how did you decide what to write about? Obviously, with all of the history and all of the stories that you heard, was that going back to your methodical way of researching?
Yes, I'd like to write about things that people have not written about. There are lots of articles that have been written about Naples, primarily beginning in the mid-70s, a lot in the 80s, and then some in the 90s. And what people tend to do is they just read the article prior and rewrite it in their words. And I didn't like that, so I wanted to start from scratch and begin the research from scratch and write about a topic that no one had written about yet in book form.
So how much research was necessary? I think you told me years and years for this book.
25 years of research and 5 solid years, 24/7 of writing.
Wow.
A lot.
I can see. Very big.
I know.
It would take me a while to read the whole thing, but it's very good.
That looks like this.
But it's very
I call
nice.
it a doorstop.
Yeah, but it has so much information in there. It was unbelievable.
Yes,
So
the reason it does is because I chronicle the development of Naples alongside the development of Collier County, alongside the development of Florida. So there's a lot of legislation that became mandated in the 70s that you don't understand why unless you start at the beginning of the book and you see how Naples developed and Collier County developed. And that's the same with every city and county in the United States. They all developed a certain way until mandates were imposed beginning in the 70s. Mandates for preservation, conservation, the EPA and things like that.
So you interviewed some of the residents. You talked about the ladies that you became part of the circle for. But your interviews with the residents as part of your research, what was the first step then in your writing process? Because you said 24/7, you gathered all the research and information, and then you began writing.
The first step in the writing process is, for me, generally, the cover picture and the title. Because by the time I've completed all the research, I know where the book is headed. I know the end. No one knows it yet, but I know it. And the only way that end can be impactful is if you look at the cover and it will tell you the story. So that's the first thing I do. And then I just begin chronologically, beginning at the very beginning,
Now, what is the most difficult part? I'm going to see if I know the answer to that, but go ahead. What is the most difficult part of your writing?
Trying to be polite when people ask me, aren't you done yet? I've lost friends.
Oh, really?
Yes. Family knows not to bother me when I'm writing. But, I mean, if the phone rings and you're thinking about something, that one ring, it flies out of your head, the thought. And you can't find it again. Because once you find it, it's so special, you need to get it down on paper immediately, or it will vanish.
I thought that you might say what to leave out, if anything.
Well, it's hard to stop.
Exactly.
Stopping is hard.
Just knowing the stories that I've discovered over this last few months that we've been looking at the Centennial progress for Collier County, there is so much information. It is so interesting, to me at least. And I think the more people read what we've done, they found it more interesting too. So I would probably start writing, and I would not ever know how to stop because
stopping is hard. And I didn't stop when I did the book on the history of Naples. I did not stop. I just kept going, and that's why it's so long.
All right. So when you get one of these done, how do you celebrate?
I take myself shopping.
Oh, good.
I have 2 antique stores, and I buy myself a vintage bracelet or a brooch.
What surprised you the most when you were researching Collier County history?
The fortitude of the early residents. Unbelievable fortitude. In the 1920s and the 1930s, these were decades during which legislation at the municipal and the county level were established. So in the 20s and 30s, that's what they were busy doing. Collier County was also busy road building. Road building was an enormous task. The population at that time was under 3,000 in the county and under 400 in the city of Naples. Most of the development we enjoy today occurred in the 50s, the 60s, the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s. The local population at that time consisted of Americans who came together in support of our troops during World War II. They brought to Collier County that ethic of working together for a common cause, which has never occurred again, other than right after 9/11, when patriotism brought Americans together in unprecedented unison. During the 70s, 80s, and 90s, as I said, the population took a back seat to development because development then had to be compliant with federal mandates. Before the local tax base was established and became healthy, the population was low. And so the people came together and pooled their resources and got things done that were necessary for the community. If something had to be built, a landowner donated the parcel. A hardware store donated the paint. A contractor donated labor. That's the fortitude of the residents is what really surprised me the most.
Yeah. I said we still see a lot of charity, I think, here in Naples.
Yeah, but it's no longer sweat charity, sweat equity. It's monetary, which there's nothing wrong with that. But to actually get out there and hammer and nail and build, we don't see much of that anymore. We don't see much of that anywhere in the United States. I mean, it's by virtue of the times we live in. We're not in pioneer days anymore.
Well, what activities do you think around Naples back while you were researching this, or what you found out during your research? What activities drew residents to participate?
There were fundraisers. There were a lot of fundraisers. For example, the Kiwanis were unbelievable. They had an auction, an annual auction at Cambier Park. They went around door to door and collected jewelry, housewares, farm animals, even a seawall. It got to a point where the annual auctions run by the Kiwanis had to be reined in, and the city of Naples had to pass an ordinance limiting the things that they were able to auction. Yes. They also had something called Short Pants Day. It was a fundraiser. They went around, they had a pickup truck that was made to look like a jail. It had bars on it and all. And they picked up any man that was not wearing short pants, fined him if he had pants on, and took him to jail until he paid the fine. And of course the fine went to charity. There was one fellow who refused to cut off only one leg of his pants and said, "I'm only paying half the fine." Of course he was joking, and they had a makeshift judge, and they took him to court, and the judge said, "No, he just has to pay half the fine." They did things that were fun, lots of fun. They even had an event at Cambier Park where they had a dunking tank, and they auctioned city officials. Florida State Attorney Blaine Taylor was here in Naples at the time, and he was smart. He wore a bathing suit. But city manager Vince Wood figured if he wore a white suit and a bow tie, they wouldn't call on him, but they did. They did.
What would you recommend to aspiring, I want to say young historians? Yes. I'm not a young historian, but a novice historian, someone that really wants to get into this.
Read. It's so important. Don't just talk to people. Well, the old timers are dwindling, unfortunately. There aren't that many around. But it's very important to read, and it's important to read research at the state level, at the county level, at the city level. Go back to the city minutes, the county commission meeting minutes. All of those will give you a good background in order to help you understand the topic that you're writing about. It's very important.
And I'm hoping that by promoting the Centennial and the research we've done and the research you helped us with and your incredible research here, I'm hoping over the rest of this summer to bring in some of the students. I think in the schools, it's the place to get people interested in history.
Absolutely.
Where we came from. I do a lot with youth leadership or Know Your Government Day. I'm going to stress those ideas. Find out about this. We've put some videos on our website, including most notorious cases in Collier County.
Yes.
Or it can be an adventure just to find out about those or research those. And the clerk, we're the record keeper.
Yes.
So I have all the record information.
You were the county historian, yes.
Exactly. if they are willing to dig in and do it.
Yes,
So
they're there at your disposal.
That's one of the things that I hope to do
And the questions that
with
they are
that.
going to ask are going to be unbelievable. They're going to be unbelievable. And the only way we can help them get started is by answering those questions and nourishing their interest.
It's been fun, though, so
Yes.
far. And I
Yes.
met you, so it's
Oh,
even more
oh.
fun. What lesson did you learn while you were writing? What's the most important lesson after years of doing this?
If you write something, don't be surprised if when you write it again, it's better than when you wrote it the first time. Nothing is final.
Editing your own work or
Editing your own
enhancing
work.
it is good?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Go ahead.
And if you're lying down and you're sleeping and a thought comes to you, don't say, well, I'll just do that tomorrow. Get up immediately. There have been times when, with my eyes closed, I've reached for a paper and a pencil that are beside me, and I've written something down without even looking at the paper because the thought's in my head. It's barely legible the next day, but I know what it says.
Okay, so you've met a lot of historical people, and you've had the experience of being in their circles. But if you could go back and meet any of the people that you wrote about, who is it that you would like to talk to?
Michael Chance. Michael Chance was editor and publisher of the Collier County News from 1950 to 1972. The Collier County News was the forerunner of the Naples Daily News. It was established in 1923 by law. When you establish a county, you must establish a newspaper to post, excuse me, public notices. He came to Collier County in '49 as a journalist. The newspaper was still being published in Everglades City. Printed in Fort Myers, but published in Everglades City, compiled in Everglades City. Everglades, the town of Everglades at the time, didn't become a city until '53. So, in 1950, the newspaper, the office of the Collier County News was relocated to Creighton Cove. And until recently, the building was still there. Until, I say recently, it was probably 10 years ago by now. But anyway, when Michael Chance came, he didn't jump on the bandwagon, he built the bandwagon. It was 1950. Like Peter Pan, the typewriter was his flute. People listened to what he wrote. His words reached every corner of Collier County. When he wrote editorials saying, vote, you must vote in the next election, there was a turnout, more than had he not, or when he didn't. If a survey needed to be conducted, he printed it in the newspaper, told people to fill it out and drop off the slips at the office at Creighton Cove. He delivered them to the city. Everything got done. I mean, it was unbelievable. I would love to have met him, Michael Chance.
He sounds like an interesting
He was our
person.
Peter Pan.
Is there anything about the historical figures that you either met or read about that surprised you?
Yes,
Someone be different.
The poets, unbelievable. The writers, County Clerk Ed Scott, and Naples Mayor William L. Clark Sr., Jr. rather. In the 1923s, their writings of what Collier County was like in 1923 were so eloquent. E.G. Wilkinson, also mayor of Naples in 1925, he wrote poetry. Inez McGill, deputy clerk, wrote a beautiful poem about the Tamiami Trail. She was on the Tamiami Trail publicity committee before she became deputy county clerk. The residents were poets. Anytime a new building appeared or an event occurred, there was a poem written about it. The Collier County News, Michael Chance established the Poetry Corner, and poems were submitted in every issue.
What do you hope your readers will take away when they do get a chance to read any of your books?
I'd like them to say, wow, I didn't know that.
I did.
Wow. At every page. I mean, you could close your eyes and open to any page and put your finger there, and there's a fact there that you didn't know. I want people to just say, wow, I didn't know that. I didn't know that's how it happened. I didn't know it was like that before. I didn't know that's how it developed. That's what my goal is, to open the door to knowledge and say, look, this is where we came from. This is how it was. This is how it developed.
Yes. Well, and that feeling, I think that is what you're trying to inspire readers, is to then become involved in it themselves. This will be very hard for someone who's written this book.
What?
If you have one word to describe you, what would you say it is?
Relentless.
I would have to agree with
If
that.
I have looked for a needle in a haystack, and I haven't found it. So I looked again. I looked 3 times. I looked 4 times and still didn't find it and said, okay, it's not there. And then a few minutes later thought, maybe I should have looked a 5th time. Relentless. 25 years ago, I would happen to be in the Swamp Buggy Incorporated office, and I looked up at the wall, and there was a beautiful poster. Swamp Buggy racing began in 1949, and the first queen was crowned in 1950. There was a poster, and it listed all the queens up until the 20s, the 2000s. And next to 5 years, it said, unidentified woman. And I said, what is this? And they said, well, we don't know who she is. And I said, this is not acceptable. I learned that we had the back copies of the Collier County News. Michael Chance had the wherewithal to put them on microfilm. All the back issues, beginning with the first one. I went back, and they're available on microfilm at the Collier County Public Library on Central Avenue. I went to the library, and I started reading and reading and reading all those years until I found the queens, and now the chart is complete. And from that, from reading all of this, I realized there's a story here. It's a story of Naples' development, not just of racing in Queens.
Okay.
And so I wrote a book called Naples' Oldest Tradition, Swamp Buggy Days. And it is Naples' oldest tradition.
And now it's ESPN News.
Yeah.
So it's really grown with the community. What do you think Baron Collier would say of what Collier County has become?
He would be extremely pleased with the development. But above all, he would say thank you for the preservation, preserving the lands which captivated me and motivated me to create Collier County. He would say thank you. The land attracted him like a magnet. He knew immediately when he set eyes on it, this is special.
I think Naples is special.
Yes.
Definitely. And so now that you've written all of these things, what still drives you to do history or to write again?
There's still a few things that haven't been written about. The road to Collier County's past is paved with words. Just pick up a book, open to the first page, and enjoy the journey.
It's actually a great way to wrap it up. I think that's the best thing you can tell the future generations.
Yes.
And I just really appreciate you coming here today and working on this with us. And
you're so welcome. I'm so honored. You're so welcome.